All right, welcome to those who just joined us. Just give us a few minutes to let others join in and we'll get started very shortly. Okay, well, we have over 20 people here, so I'll go ahead and get started with my introduction and people will trickle in as we get started. But welcome to tonight's Jumpstart Germantown JUMPinar. This is our weekly webinar series that we host almost every Monday night, usually bi-weekly now. But we talk about several various topics in real estate, everything from financing to construction, things that an aspiring developer should know as they begin their career in real estate investing and rehab and development. And we like to bring on different speakers. And tonight we're joined by Zip Code Wilmington, which is an organization out of, you guessed it, Wilmington. And three of their members, Lossie, Christopher, and Disa, are joining us. And they're going to be discussing their program and how coding and software development works into real estate development, and the programs that they offer that you can take advantage of. So we'll get to that in a minute, but just a couple of housekeeping things. To start is the Jumpstart Germantown training program, which is starting in just about a week on February 1st. So we are currently enrolling people in it right now. So if you've been on the wait list and haven't heard anything or are waiting for an email invitation, be sure to check and check your spam and junk folder for an invitation from us. And if not, you can reach out to Jumpstart at Philly Office Retail, and I'll put that in the chat in case you have any questions about your enrollment. But this is your chance. We were doing it in person, and there was limited attendance, but now that we're doing it virtually online, there's a lot more spots, and we're enrolling a lot more people. So look out for your emails about that, and be sure to apply and enroll. And the second housekeeping thing, I just want to hand it over to Maeva real quick, who's going to tell us about Jumpstart's lending programs, Jumpstart Germantown and Jumpstart Philly.
Hi, everyone. So the Jumpstart Germantown and the Jumpstart Philly loan programs offer short-term financing for the acquisition and renovation of residential properties in Germantown and other neighborhoods in Philadelphia. It is open to experienced and beginner developers. And also to connect it to the training program graduates do get a lower interest rate. So it may be a great option for you if you're looking for financing. And I'll have the links to the different program web pages in the chat, and also an email you can reach out to if you have more questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maeva. We're going to have a Q&A session tonight, so that'll be held to the end. So all your questions that you type into the Q&A and on the Zoom toolbar there, we'll save till then. But be sure to think of some great questions to ask our guests while we have them. And yeah, that's all the housekeeping, and I'll get started with our introduction of Zip Code Wilmington. And it's a 12-week training program. It's a boot camp for individuals seeking to learn the ins and outs of software development. And their goal is to teach you the skills you need as a software developer with a focus on individual professional development. And joining us is Lossie Freeman, Christopher Younger, and Disa Burton, and I'll let them each shortly introduce themselves. But it's great to see you guys tonight, and thanks for joining us for the talk. How's it going, Lossie? Why don't you start by introducing yourself? And it looks like you got slides and all set. Cool. All right. Lassie, I think you're still on mute, so make sure you unmute before we begin.
Of course, I'm the first casualty of the night. Got me. First of all, thank you, Derek. Thank you, Jumpstart Philadelphia, for allowing us the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. I've known about your organization for a long time and all of the good work that you're doing in Philadelphia, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to speak to all of the Jumpstarters tonight. I have my executive director and my boss, Disa Burton, whom I think will just kind of kick us off with a few words. You can see our slide, and she'll just kind of tell you a bit about our organization and what we do.
Thank you so much, Lassie. My name is Disa Burton, and I'm the executive director at Zip Code Wilmington. I'm really excited that Zip Code is able to present tonight to Jumpstart. So a big thank you to Derek and the team there and bringing us in. I know some of you are probably thinking, what does software development have to do with code, with real estate? But I can tell you that I am a former realtor in Delaware. And one of the things that I thought about as a realtor is, how do you manage all this data? You know, how do you use data to your advantage? As a developer, how can you use data to meet more efficiently, go about finding listings and figuring out which properties are the best for you to use? That was before I became the executive director of Zip Code. And as the executive director, I sat down with Lassie, who's our director of corporate partnerships, and Christopher Younger, Chris, who's here, who was our director of education. And I said, you know what, we really ought to reach out to the real estate community and tell them about coding, tell them about how programming can help them maximize what it is they're doing, make their work more efficient. So a little bit about Zip Code. We are a nonprofit software boot camp here in Wilmington, Delaware. We have over 500 graduates, founded in 2015 for the purpose of, you know, basically helping build the economy of Wilmington by training one coder at a time. And we've been very successful at it. We have a slide deck that we're going to go over, so I'll just kind of tease you with that and leave it there and turn it back over to Lassie.
Thanks, Disa. So just a little bit about tonight and what the rundown is going to look like. I will start with a few slides about Zip Code. Thank you, Derek, for ingratiating us, allowing us a little bit of time to tell you about our organization, what we do, and our academy, which is right here in downtown Wilmington. And then from there, our director of education, Chris Younger, is going to take over and really go in depth, well, surface level in depth, as much as you can do in about 45 minutes. To give you guys an overview of how data analytics will impact your industry, what's changing. And so allow me to just kind of walk through some of the slides. Derek, give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay. So Disa explained, we are a nonprofit coding boot camp located right in the heart of downtown Wilmington. We've been in existence since 2015. This is a very big milestone for us. We just had a cohort that graduated on Friday, which makes over 500 software developers and data engineers that we've successfully graduated from this program. As I mentioned, we are a nonprofit coding boot camp. There are lots of for-profit coding boot camps, but only about a dozen or so in the nation that are nonprofit and dedicated to the mission that we are, which is to take regular, ordinary folks, upskill, reskill people who are transitioning from other careers, other professions, or people who always had a passion for technology and never had an on-ramp. We're providing those opportunities and aligning people with the capability and the capacity to learn technology with all of these great jobs that have gone unfilled. So we're really, as Disa said, really filling up and scaling up our city and making this just a real technology hub. Disa, a little bit about our backgrounds and who we are. Disa is our executive director, a former Naval Academy graduate and a US Navy veteran, surface warfare officer in the US Navy, and she's also an attorney. She went to University of Pennsylvania Law School and is a practicing attorney, and then she came to Zip Code Wilmington. Her work as a veteran brought her to Zip Code Wilmington. I don't know why I'm telling you a story, Disa. Tell your own story, but just really briefly. And Chris Younger is our director of education. We are just amazed to have someone with such great talent and a breadth of experience. He is typically a West Coast technology guy on the East Coast. He's worked with the likes of Steve Jobs and other legacies in technology, and he's a legacy in his own right and could be anywhere, but he chose to be at our school because he really believes in what we're doing. So yeah, Chris Younger. So as I mentioned, since we were founded, we've educated over 500 people. The majority of those folks have gone on to start really great software careers in development. We run a 12-week intensive boot camp. We offer 2 tracks. The first is Java, which we run for the past 5 years, and the data engineering, which is fairly new. They are full-time programs, and our students put in over 1,100 hours of really hardcore software development learning. It's cohort-based. And I'm happy to tell you that we have currently full scholarships available for any eligible student who is low to mid-income and a resident of Delaware. Our model is based on landing people jobs. So we're not just a training program for the sake of training, but we also help people find gainful employment in the industry when they leave. Just a few stats about what we've managed to do. 75% of our graduates have remained right here working in the Wilmington area. And I say greater Wilmington, which includes Philadelphia, Maryland, but now we're really expanding, particularly since we went virtual. You can see the difference that we're making in the lives of our graduates. These are people, the basic requirement for zip code is a high school diploma. And so we're taking people from an average of about $24,000 a year to an average of $74,000 a year. And that's really inching up more to 85. So if you know people, or if you yourself are interested in launching a new career or enhancing the career that you have after this session, after Chris blows your mind with how data analytics is changing the real estate industry, I hope that you will consider Zip Code Wilmington. It's a fast growing industry, as you can see. I'm going to zoom through our slides so that I don't take up all of the time talking about this. A little bit about who our students are. This is not for your grandson or your son or your neighbor's kid. This is for anybody. The average age of our students is 35. So this really is an opportunity that is in the grasp, in the reach of anyone who is interested in and fascinated by technology.
Great.
A little bit about the stats, and then I'll just kind of cruise on. Into the topic for today about data analytics. I will sum it up with a quote from a UK REIT that says, if you don't use data efficiently and effectively, then you will miss a huge amount of value in your business market. Others will not make this mistake, and you will become increasingly uncompetitive. Ultimately, the world is only going one way. And I think that really does sum up the industry. The real estate industry is likely at the start of a significant shift towards technology. We can feel that. I would say that real estate industry is probably at the latter end of the curve. We have all experienced it, whether it's your social media, whether it's buying stuff on Amazon, at a retailer, certainly in financial services, we've seen this revolution. But real estate is one of the industries with one of the largest data sets. You all have been collecting data over decades, and there is so much of it that's available. And this revolution is really coming. You're seeing a lot more statistical modeling happening. Businesses being driven by this modeling, and it's really driving business decisions. And so data is going to become even more and more important. We're seeing that technology come. We're seeing competition entering for real estate, and we're seeing it in appraisals, forecasts, investment. You can even see it as data, as Disa was mentioning, with real estate in the virtual world. Think about how technology has changed the industry just in the way that you view homes now. I can look at a home in the United Arab Emirates from right here in my home in Wilmington. And that's something that never before was a capability. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I will let Chris Younger share all of his wisdom and knowledge with you.
And Chris, before you start, I just want to remind everybody that we are going to have a Q&A session if anybody had joined in the past 10 minutes. So be sure to enter any of your questions in there while Chris starts spreading some knowledge here. But otherwise, go for it.
Thanks, Derek and Lassie. The fascinating thing to me about this entire space, and I've been involved in the network computing a very, very long time, is and involved in a lot of aspects of internet and the internet over the last 10 or 15 years. And when you look at it and you see the way that the internet is disrupting a lot of what were traditional businesses, everything from newspapers to broadcast television, you do see this huge impact that data and programming and software is generally having on these industries. So you see something like the MLS system, which 30 years ago was amazing because you'd have to go to a real estate office to actually have someone who knew how to use it. They'd log into it, they'd show you possible, and then you'd hop in a car and drive around and, you know, spend all day looking at 6 houses or something, right? So when I think about that kind of experience ever so long ago with the recent one that I had, where you have things like Compass and Zillow and all the rest of them, it's really quite astonishing to see how the internet is, you know, not only interrupting what were traditional business processes, but are actually making them better. And certainly from the point of view of the client or the customer, very, very interesting things going on. Now, there's lots and lots of data out there. And we're going to look at some of these sites and some of the things that I found as I was prepping the remarks for tonight. But one of the things I want to leave you with at the very end is a crib sheet that allows you to go back and look at some of these sources that I'm going to use tonight, because I think as you are looking at the kinds of rehabilitation and so forth projects that you're working on, the development that you're doing, perhaps some of this information will be useful to you. And that's what I'm really interested in doing here, because we are on an educational mission, and I like educating people, and I like showing people interesting things that they find whiz bang, and maybe those whiz bang things will actually help you save money or do something. The only thing that I think you'll need to learn to do on a technical point of view is if you have not spent any time with a spreadsheet, that might be where you might want to spend some time, because the other things that I'm going to talk about are relatively straightforward, and I think you'll find them interesting, especially once you get your hands on the pages that I'm using and can zoom around in them yourself, looking at some of your projects and potential projects. So I will share this browser with y'all. And what we're going to talk about tonight is a series of these tabs that I've got here on my browser. There's lots, as I say, there's lots and lots and lots of data out there. And oftentimes it's finding the right data, figuring out what it's telling you, and then figuring out how can I actually apply it to some aspect of something that I'm trying to do. And in this case, there are lots and lots of fancy tools out there. And this is perhaps the fanciest, Tableau. It is used by Fortune 500 companies. It's fairly expensive. It is, however, the kind of thing that people are making livings out of, learning Tableau, wrangling data for CEOs, and impacting business with them. Now, when I say data wrangling, yeah, that's actually a term of art these days. It's where you have to take data that comes from one source and potentially clean it up or change it around or do various things to it so that it's in another source that you can then analyze. So that's the kind of thing that big companies are doing with tools like Tableau. They're pulling stuff out of their databases on their websites, out of their databases where their customer information is, and it's all kind of flowing in and out and whatever else. Well, okay, but you guys aren't a big bank. You're somebody who's interested in potentially taking advantage of one of these Jumpstart loan programs and focusing on, you know, making a change in your community. So when I started looking at the kinds of things that people talk about with respect to the Philadelphia real estate market, you see some very interesting things, and you come across a lot of data. Now, this particular website is a commercial product, and they have a bunch of tools and calculators up here, things that they can do. But the fascinating thing to me is they started talking about, the key population stats. And one of the things you'll see in a lot of data websites is this use of statistics, where they talk about rates of growth or percent this or percent that. Sometimes that stuff can get a little confusing, I think. And you really kind of have to look at it and wonder, why are they telling me that? Like, for instance, there's 3.6 million employees in Philadelphia, but it's growing at only 1.1. That doesn't seem like a lot when somebody tells me I want to, make 5, 10, 15% a year on money. 1.1% doesn't seem like a lot. So my point here is you have to look at this data, and this is data, even if it's not in a spreadsheet, and puzzle, is that useful to me in any real way? And it may not be. That's my point, right? You can look at some of these key employment stats, again, job growth rates, and the fact that it's not a surprise to anyone that people like Comcast, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, Cigna, and Colonial Penn are big employers. None of this sort of seems to, now we get down to the real estate market, where they're talking about home values, and they're saying things like the Zillow home value index is $228,000, and that just seems outrageous to me. But maybe it's not, because I think there's a lot of multi-million-dollar condos in Philadelphia, right? So you look at some of this stuff and you kind of go, yeah, but Chris, some of this, days on the market is 62. I imagine that's actually somewhat, maybe quite a bit shorter than that, based on whatever latest data is out there. Median listing per price per square foot is $200. Again, median in the data sense doesn't mean average, right? Average is where you take everything and you add them all up and you divide by the number of things, right? Well, median is when you take the list of all of the prices and you find the one that's in the middle with 50% above and 50% below. So that's different than the average, which can be skewed in various ways. But the key thing here is this $200 number here. We're going to come back to that perhaps in a few slides, okay? So it also proves to be an attractive renter's market. Well, this may be of interest to you if you are developing a residence for use as a rental unit, perhaps, right? And so you come across this stuff in a lot of blogs, right? These kinds of data in here. And a lot of times what I do with this as I'm reading it is, if I don't understand it, I don't get frustrated, I just skip over it. I learned this a long time ago when trying to understand mathematics. When you don't understand a piece of math or a piece of science, you jump over it and you keep looking until you find something that actually does make sense, right? And you just kind of go, so in spite of all that stuff that I might not, like for instance, down here, I saw these things, HPI. I have no idea what that means, and I'm not going to look it up, right? But the point of the matter is so I don't know what that means, and I guess I don't really. 5-year change in house prices, 42% up. Well, that's a number that I can understand. Over 5 years, home prices have raised by an average of 42%. So a lot of these kinds of data that are out there are in this kind of format where it's in a blog and it's almost like an article. And a lot of times these articles feel like you're breaking rocks trying to understand what's there and what's useful. Now, the next one that I want to talk about was Redfin. Again, as a website, these folks are trying to make money on the data, and they're trying to show you listings, and they're trying to show you trends, and they're trying to figure out, how do we sell a $185,000 house? in many cases, this kind of data you have to be careful with, because you can assume, I think generally, that it's cast towards making Redfin money in some way, right? And again, that's just sort of critical thinking. You look at it and you go, yeah, of course, they're probably not showing a lot of $46,000 houses. They're probably showing a lot that are much more expensive than that. So when you're looking at some of this kind of data, again, is it useful? I don't know. It might be. It might not be. Now, this one I came across and I liked a lot. We see down here that the guy's name is Aaron Kreider, and he was with an organization or part of an organization called campusactivism.org. I couldn't find a lot of information about them, but this particular map is kind of interesting to me because I love maps. I absolutely love maps. And the only thing I love better than a map is a map that's got data on it, which is really cool, because you can then do crazy things like zoom in on these maps, right? And we're doing this with standard pinching, right? And we can zoom in and we can actually see what these various numbers, dollars per square foot of living area. And we can see where the expensive parts of town are, right? Where the green is, or the inexpensive parts of town, where the red is. And again, when we're looking at this, it's interesting to see this, but this isn't a terribly useful site to you, other than if you know the neighborhood well, you might, I suppose, be able to zoom right in on North Lawrence Street here, for instance, and find the particular house or the particular property that you're interested in, right? In any case, this kind of data is becoming more and more available across the internet, and it's getting more and more useful. As such, we're going to look at a couple of these others. So this is the one that I say, make sure you look at the bottom of the page and you click on some of those links down there, because here I'm looking at the Philadelphia house prices. Here, I'm a history buff, I'm looking at the ages of the homes, and they go everything from 1750 all the way up to plus 2010. But then there's also house price changes. And now this is April 14 to November 17 data. But again, you could say, yeah, okay, there are parts of town that I'm familiar with, and those are parts of town that are still coming up or are still going down in terms of average values, right? And again, because of this, and we all see this daily with our GPSs in our cars and everything else, you can zoom around and actually find a particular neighborhood or find some place that you're interested in and look at it. And then finally, we've got this land value by square foot, which again goes from $2.50 a square foot to over 100. And it doesn't come as a surprise to anybody that there's whole parts of Center City, Philadelphia, where it's very expensive to live. Parts of West Philadelphia out here that maybe are less so, Kensington and the rest up this way, right? And again, we kind of know this from not being familiar with the areas, but also with the experience that you've had and the projects that you've done and the kind of projects that you're hoping to do. So again, this kind of data might be very, very useful to you in getting a lay of the land, if you will, getting a feel for where things are trending and that sort of thing, right? We also have stuff like the Philadelphia changes in rent here. And again, when we zoom in here, we notice, well, now this may be a little less useful, because while it shows us trends, they're so blocky, it may be hard to know exactly where one particular trend stops and another particular trend starts, right? So again, these are the kinds of maps with data on them that are becoming very, very commonplace in many different geographies for real estate, and also for lots of other things beyond real estate, like education and school districts and the rest of it. So it gets very interesting because you do see things also like, for instance, Philadelphia land value as percent of total assessed value. And I haven't thought about what that would mean, but I suspect what it is it's like the value of percent of the total value, land divided by the total assessed property value. So I assume it means like if you've built something very, very valuable on it, it's worth more than if it has a flat lot, parking lot on it or something. Now, I also want to point out that data and the use of data in many of these, again, from these articles, you see things like median housing prices. You might have to look up what median again means. This is by zip code here, right? But these are changes from 2010 to 2016. Now, we all know that the overheated market of the last few years is not reflected in data like this. It might be significantly different. We have home sales. We have the fact that the PHA's waiting list and how it's fluctuated over the years. And of course, we can go to PHA, the Philadelphia Housing Authority, and get up-to-date 2020 numbers on this sort of stuff. Percentage of residents paying at least 30% of income in rent. Philadelphia ranks pretty high on that. That may mean that potentially something that is attractively priced in the rental market may be easier to rent than something that isn't. We also have homes in Philadelphia are substantially more affordable than other cities, which is kind of interesting, especially when you compare it to our neighbors in Baltimore. And I have no idea, Lassie, if we have anywhere, if the mayor's office ever had information like this for Wilmington. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it can be, I think it is available. When I was in the mayor's office, we had access to it. I'm not sure if it's public, but anything is public. If you pay for it or ask for it, it can be FOIA'd.
Sure. So the final thing I want to talk about here is this great site that I'm hoping you haven't seen, or if you have, you agree with me. This is a terrific site to be able to play with. In this particular case, this is property.phila.gov. And Derek, is this something that in your trainings you would be spending a lot of time with?
Oh yeah, this is the #1 recommendation for anything code or deeds or mortgages, or if you want to know any city record held information about a property. This is where we point people. So, and we use it a lot as a lender too. From a financing point. Yeah.
That's cool. So these are the notes that I'll drop in the text for you before the end of the session. I'm going to grab this address. This is a sampling of the addresses that were in the PHA lottery that was held just this last Q4 in 2021. I do not know the status of any of these addresses, but they were all in that 20 property lottery that was being held at the end of the year.
Yep.
And I was just going to use it as a sample. I was going to use this North Edding Street address for that.
Yeah.
So if you have or haven't seen this before, you type in an address that you're interested in and hit return, and it tells you something about that address. It gives you all of the static information, as well as, interestingly enough, market values. Now, this is odd to me because, again, these market values are, the last time this house was sold was in like 1978. So it's kind of interesting that, again, I think there's estimation going on here in these prices and so forth, but nonetheless, it's kind of interesting because you can find out a lot of information, again, about this particular home. And here's a number that we're going to want to remember here is this 1199 or 1,200 square feet, which probably was a fairly standard size for homes in this neighborhood when it was built. In any case, this is an example of the way that you can, find a particular data about a particular address. Now, I like this a lot because this allowed me to select a radius around this property. And correctly, I think, the website limits the number of properties that you can actually select using a tool like this. But we can actually select the radius by coming down here and clicking on our little balloon there. And what it will do is it will actually select all of the properties that are within 250 feet of that one, which is pretty interesting, because then again, it gives you a fairly clear showing of what it is you've got here. And I want to point out these two pieces of property here, this big one, which is, I'm not quite sure, I didn't actually look at it as to what it is on Google Street View. And this one, they're both very expensive properties, $248,000 and $168,000, which are a lot different than the other properties in terms of size and so forth that are in this selection. But the key here is this button down here with right here. It's called Download CSV. And download CSV means, see this data down here in this table? We want to copy that out of there. And that's what this download CSV button lets us do. And it's pretty cool, because I can then press this button and it will download it to my computer and put it in my download folder. And now what we can do is we can actually go off to a spreadsheet and do something with it. Now, if you don't have a Gmail account already, you might consider getting one just for the purpose of being able to get access to Google Sheets, which is a great free spreadsheet. And with it, you can save data to your Gmail account, and you can keep things and so on and so forth. You can also use Microsoft Excel or any other spreadsheet that you might be familiar with. But again, this is a good, inexpensive one, and it just kind of hangs out there, and you get it, like I say, for free if you're logged into a Gmail account on Google. Information about how to get that account is in the notes, very straightforward. So the thing I can do here is I can import the data that I just wanted, and I want to go to upload, and then I got to come out here and I've got to off of screen here, drag this document in there. That was the one that we just downloaded. And I can say, please import that data. And it really is that simple. Import the data, and now I have the entire table of data of those, I don't even know how many properties it is, about 150. So again, manipulating this in a spreadsheet is fairly straightforward. Now you'll notice here, here's the Allegheny property at 248,000. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it out of there so that it does not, excuse me, I'm gonna delete it, delete the row so that it doesn't contaminate our data. We also have this other one here, which is we've got this one here, which is a $100,000 property of some kind. I guess we'll leave that one in there. Here's another one, 119,000. You might actually want to go in and grab the address, which is right there in that column. You might actually, as you're cleaning up this data, you may want to go look at those pieces of property and say, oh, that's a dry cleaner, or that's a gas station, or whatever. And you may say, you know, that if I keep that data in my data set, it's gonna, you know, make things skew it a little bit, change it. So we remove that big piece, and then there was another one in here. I don't see it now. It was the Edding. There it is, 168. It's owned by the city of Philadelphia, and that may be some sort of park, I thought, perhaps, based on what I kind of looked at. And we delete that row. So again, just by doing simple things like scrolling through and looking at the data, pulling out these big properties, that's something that in the data biz you'll hear referred to as the outliers. And a lot of times, if you've got a property that changed hand for like $10 or something, you might want to pull it out because it might be just a family, you know, going from mother to son or something like that. And again, that kind of data, a big piece of data like, or a big piece of property like the $250,000 one might make things kind of a mess. So anyway, we come back here, and let me make this a little bigger. We come down to the bottom here and we scroll across. And if we look at this G column here is the market value of the property. And while we're up here, I think I'll show you that the other column I'm interested in here is the improvements areas. This is the number of square feet of the property itself. Okay. The next one over, and something we're not interested in this case, is the actual square footage of the lot. So the city gives us both. It gives us the land area and the improved area. And so what we're going to do is a simple data analysis. We're going to come down here to the bottom of the market value column. And we're going to put in a very simple formula where we're going to take the average of everything in this column. And that's what that is. Then if I go over here to the K column, which is where the square footage is of the actual improvements, and I say I want to make it the average, it's going to show me 1,299. Now I could come back over here and I can do something very simple. I can take the average price of all of these properties and divide it by the average square footage of all these properties. So if I do that, I come in here and I take this cell and I divide it by that cell, which is the average of the square footages. And when I hit return on that, it tells me $37. And if I actually were to ask for that in dollars and cents, it would tell me that we're talking about an average square foot value of $37.32, which is quite a bit different than the $200 per square foot that we saw in that article, right? So it would seem to me, if there's a way to take this property that we're interested in, this 3222 North Edding, and we're able to, improve it for something quite a bit less than $37 a square foot, we can probably make money on this property, right? So anyway, that's the basic idea of the very simple data analysis and data engineering that we've done here tonight. But it's an example of, again, the way you can, with very simple tools like a Google spreadsheet, which is not hard to get a hold of and learn how to use, and this great source of data here in Philadelphia, the property website, you can kind of create potentially analytical support for whatever your business case is. I'm assuming that as you're looking at these properties and thinking about which ones to change and develop and modify and so forth, that this kind of information could be quite useful in knowing, am I going to be able to do it in such a way that I can make it work with the loans and the construction materials and the labor costs and all the other things that I'm going to have to do to actually improve the property. Or should I look at others, right? You could do this for lots of different properties and gradually figure out which one's your best target, maybe. So anyway, that's what I had, Derek.
Yeah,
Rossi, turn it back to you, or Derek, to you for questions.
For sure, yeah. I mean, Chris, thank you so much. That was an excellent walkthrough of just like seeing, the different ways that the data can be portrayed to you, and then how like doing your own research on the end can provide a different answer. That's I think a really good explicit example of why it's important to do your own data management research or data analyzation and research. And you did it with a few free tools on the internet and maybe 3 or 4 links, and that's awesome. And people who might not be super tech savvy or super interested in computers, I think this is very accessible to them and a good starting point, for them to learn more.
And Derek, I've just put the link to the notes that I've got here.
Awesome.
These notes right here, they're on one of our websites here at Zip Code, and feel free to copy down that URL and look at these tabs that I've used and potentially even step through the example that I just gave you so that before you forget it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I tell you, do the homework right after the lecture. Otherwise, you're going to forget what I talked about.
Right. Well, I'll absolutely be sharing that with everybody. I'll send it out to everybody who had registered and attended. And I also learned a few other intriguing ideas of ways of doing comp research and identifying what the market value might be. So I'll be experimenting with my own and sharing it with my my friends at Jumpstart as well. So yeah, I want to give. I have just two or three questions I jotted down that I'll ask you to get things started, and then hopefully people will be able to put their own questions in the Q&A tab as I get going here to close out tonight's session. But first, Chris, I just wanted to ask you, when you're doing some of those earlier forms of data research, like Googling around on some of those websites or some of those business development websites that kind of try and break things down, appealing to different groups of people. What tips would you give somebody to validate the sources and to identify like which data is trustworthy and which isn't trustworthy? Obviously we could have a whole other hour-long webinar on how to validate sources, but for specifically real estate market data, like how do you know if these people know what they're talking about or not? In your experience,
yeah, generally, and this is true of data across the spectrum, right? This isn't just about real estate. Right. Data that tends to come from government agencies, whether that's federal, state, or local government agencies, tends to be pretty good, right? Tends to be pretty reliable. And a lot of that is of course, because our tax dollars at work, but also it's because many of these departments and so forth are built by or are run by, frankly, professionals who take a lot of pride in the data that they publish to the outside world.
Right.
So, it's one of those things where I would certainly be very comfortable with that. If you will, just some guy's blog, I might be a little bit more worried. Did they transpose a number, or are there attributions and the links that they have to where they got the data? Are those solid? And again, if it's to news organizations or something that you've never heard of, you might be a little wary of that stuff. I also tend to think when you come across articles that are written by people who are, well known in the industry, most of those folks, of course, will be pretty reliable and reputable when it comes to producing this kind of data. When it comes to stuff like a Zillow or some of the other companies that are in this business, I think you can pretty much take them at their word, because again, I think they're trying very hard to be credible in many ways. And so I tend to think you can probably also trust those. But again, I think it's you've got to make that decision yourself, right? You've got to look at those things and decide that, is this the kind of thing I'm willing to trust, or do I just want to stick with, say, U.S. Department of Housing or Philadelphia city sources.
Right.
Like
I guess another thing, it depends on the weight of the decision, right? So
yep.
if you're deciding whether or not to buy a property, for your entire life savings, it might be worth looking a little deeper than Redfin, right?
Always better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. And then
we're playing around too, and you can download the data set directly from Zillow. So you don't have to just look at their analysis tools. You can download it, the raw data itself, and manipulate it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think to ask that, but the download CSV feature, I've used that a few times here and there, but I imagine a lot of websites, more than we'd think, have the ability to do that, right? And that's kind of people's like first go-to way to pull numbers and charts from a website.
Yeah, CSV is a very common format. It's very old. It's been used for lots and lots of years. It's actually a very simple text format. So it's the kind of thing you can throw into an email message or something, and it doesn't get corrupted. Like, sometimes the tables and things get all funky when you're trying to send them an email or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, CSV is a good one. Another one that's very up and coming and used for a lot of stuff, from everything from Facebook to Instagram to everything else, is JSON, JSON. That's another form of data that a lot of sites will give you. And most spreadsheets can read that in too, for instance. relatively straightforwardly.
Cool. Yep. And I have one more question for you. And it seems like you did an excellent job because we have no viewer questions, which
it may also be
which is
bad. I don't know.
yeah. But I will be sure to include your emails, or at least Lossie's email, so we can get any follow-up questions. Jihad just chimed in and said, thank you to everyone. Excellent information. And I certainly agree with him. But okay, so my last question was just kind of like going beyond what we talked about tonight. Say someone's a master, or they think they're a master in Google Sheets. They're familiar with Zillow and Redfin and how to navigate those sites, and they've used Atlas all the time. Other than enrolling in Zip Code Wilmington, what would you say is the like next step up of things that they should consider to teach themselves about coding? I mean, I know Excel kind of takes, like nobody doesn't use Excel or Google Sheets, but are there programs online that kind of cater to real estate developers to manage their data? I know I've heard of things like Builders Trend, or there's some other like project management sites, but I didn't know if there was any like specific route you would recommend somebody in their next
There really isn't in the sort of what I'd kind of term the real estate business case development, right? Because if you're thinking about it, what you're really doing here is you're building a business case for yourself to make a decision on, right? Am I actually gonna go do this particular project? But certainly, I mean, I can always teach you data engineering at Zip Code Wilmington. Okay, I take 3 months, but all right. There's always that. But I would definitely say that if you're interested in the longer term of this, is not only getting to know some of the coding tools that are out there, things like the programming language Python, and some of the tools that are in and around it. Python is a language that we're teaching in most of the schools, from middle school, high school, colleges, and so forth. And it's a very straightforward skill to be able to pick up. And there's a lot of data analytics tools that are in and around Python. Okay. And that's just like Monty Python. That's what it's named after, actually. And so Python's a good place if you really have a technical bent. I also tend to think that, ask around, there's techies around you, and many of them might be able to help. They could conceivably work with you on spreadsheets, work with you potentially with a little bit of Python or some of these websites to be able to pull data more automatically and be able to get through more data faster, right? Which is really what you're looking to do. The really good news in all of this is that the kinds of sites like Philadelphia Property or Zillow or others, they're all using the same standards these days. So learning how to work with one of them will get you a huge leg up on being able to work with all of them.
Yeah, great. All right, that certainly answered my question. And there's two more here. One from Keith, and he's wondering, is there a way to access every address in Philadelphia in one CSV? So I don't know if Atlas can handle that, but he's suggested maybe you could request that information from somebody. Is that something that you could reach out to the city about, or?
Yeah, I might reach out to the city on that, or Google around. I've got to imagine that there are sites of people who do use these APIs for not only commercial but other purposes, and they may have. There may be a community out there that knows lots about it, right? I would be awfully surprised if Property would let you download all the addresses in Philadelphia, just because it's a pretty big data set, right?
Can you do that on your personal computer, Chris, or would you?
You could. It's a pretty big data set. It's not a big data set, if you know what I mean. It's the kind of thing that, you wouldn't want to throw it into a spreadsheet, but other tools that do, data analysis, it's very possible. Okay. I certainly wouldn't throw it into Excel if you could somehow get it. But the city, if they make it available to you in small chunks, I would think you could make a, personal plea and they'd give it to you in a big chunk, maybe once. Right. But asking for them, updated every week or something is probably not something anybody's willing to do.
The city of Philadelphia has enough trouble updating their websites. I don't know. Sending that around.
To go back to what your question about some of the software, there are a ton of companies that are offering software data analytics tools. They're very expensive. I wouldn't say they're for individual, but big real estate houses are all using them.
Right.
To make those informed, sophisticated decisions, but it's pretty much out of the reach of most of us.
Right. And I'm sure certain options become available if you're a realtor, or have your real estate license, you know, or even a contractor, maybe, you know, have like special ins and outs of the networks they can connect with. But okay, lastly, to close it out, the weird enough, I have two Bruces who are both asking about the Zip Code Wilmington course, and their first is, are you offering part-time classes outside of the 3-month program? And then also, do you have multiple training programs per year? And they're just asking if I can put your website in the chat.
There you go, Diza.
Yes, we do offer multiple programs per year, but currently we don't have a part-time program. It is full-time. We do have scholarships available to folks that are qualified, that can ease a little bit of the burden of being full-time in a program like this. But the level of skill that you get coming out of a Zip Code Wilmington is parallel to none. We give you, you know, in our data analytics and engineering program, you'll learn to use tools like Tableau. You'll learn to use the tools that create those maps that Chris is talking about, so you can actually pull those large amounts of data and being able to manipulate them and show those things. I mean, we've all seen these maps throughout COVID, showing trends. And if you can imagine the different types of things you would be able to do if you have a focused neighborhood that you want to watch, you would be able to take data and be able to manipulate it and look at the trends and note for yourself what's happening. So as a realtor, that would be really important for you. As a developer, just absolutely essential.
All right. Okay, great. Well, that's perfect on timing, and I think we'll close out tonight's session. Just real quick, last comment from Donald was AWS has a free suite of big data tools, but it is fairly involved. So I'm sure I think I've heard of AWS. If you're looking for if you really want that every address in Philadelphia list, that's where you can go.
Yep. And AWS, again, the notion of using Python and those tools online, it's very involved, and you would be spending a great deal of time figuring it out. So.
Right.
Yep.
All right. So we'll save that for the next JUMPinar.
Thank you so much, Derek, for the opportunity. And for anyone looking for more information about us, it's at www.zipcodewilmington.com. And we'd be happy to answer any questions. Or our next session, we run 3 sessions a year. The next one starts in June that you can enroll. So check us out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll be putting all that information in an email tomorrow or the next day, so everybody has that along with Chris's note sheet. But just a heads up about what we have coming up for the JUMPinar series on the 7th, which is in 2 weeks. We're talking about solar states with Micah Goldmark Ellen. I believe they're a solar panel company that's going to be talking about the benefits of that in development. And then on the 21st, later next month, we're speaking with Greg Trainer about his organization, Philadelphia Community Core. So stay tuned for those, and you can register at jumpstartgermantown.com/events. And this Zoom recording will be available at jumpstartgermantown.com/jumpinars as soon as Wednesday, probably. So keep an eye out for that if you want to review it again or share it with anybody who missed. But that's all we got, and I just want to thank our guests one last time, and I hope to see you again soon. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Lossie, Chris, and Disa. And bye, everybody. Have a good night, Monday.
Have a great night. Thanks, Derek.